Hi, this is Brian Hong and welcome to the wonderful world of Power Query. So before we dive into the details of Power Query, I want to give you a quick overview of what Power Query is all about. So what we have here is actually a finished example of where we use Power Query to transform our data. So for example, this one has a list of names and then we just use Power Query to trim it and give us a result of clean data. So first things first is, what is Power Query all about? So Power Query is all about cleaning your data. So it's really good in terms of getting your dirty data from different sources, for example, and then cleaning them or transforming them into a different form that will be useful for you when it comes to, let's say, creating reports out of it or creating a pivot table out of it. That's what Power Query is really useful for. And another thing is, if you have different sources of data and you want to aggregate them together, let's say you have sources from a database, let's say an Access database, or maybe another Excel file or text files, or even from web services, right? When you get all of these different sources of data, you can aggregate them together using Power Query into one central location or data model, and then you can perform your cleanup steps on it. Right? So what we want to show you here quickly is the preview of the query editor ribbon in Power Query. So here's what I'll do. I'll go straight to data. Let's go to show queries. I'll just right click and edit here. And we will be taken straight to the query editor window wherein I perform the step using Power Query when it comes to trimming the data. So what I want to show you here first is just an overview of what the functions are. Like for the home tab, we have close and load. So once you're happy with the resulting query, then you can just close and load, and the resulting data or the clean data would load into your Excel worksheet. But before we proceed with other functions over here, I want to show you first over here the query settings, and you could see here on the right side the applied steps. And this is really cool because whatever steps that you have done in Power Query, it will all be listed here step by step. So which means if you make a mistake along the way, you can just go back to, let's say, step number 5 or step number 3 and make changes from that, which means Power Query is very lenient when it comes to experimentation. It really encourages you to experiment and use all of the functions so that you can get your desired result. And if ever you make a mistake, you can just go somewhere in the middle, delete it, modify it, and then you can just replay the steps that you have just did. Okay, so let's go back to the home tab. So we have choose columns. So what columns do you want to keep, right? And then we also have remove columns. So we have remove columns, the ones that you selected, or remove the other columns that you have not selected. We also have keep rows. So you could think of it as similar to the column counterpart, right? Whatever you selected, just keep those rows. And then same thing for remove rows, which once you've selected, then just delete it from your data. And then we have sorting, we have splitting of columns. So we have splitting by delimiter or splitting by the number of characters. So delimiter, if it's a comma delimited value, then you can split it to multiple columns or other delimiters that you want to use. You also have number of characters. So if you want to split it by 3 characters or 5 characters, then you can do that as well. Group by, we're going to be discussing this more in detail in one of the examples in our course. And then we also have data types. So there's a lot of data types that you can support. So if you want Power Query to set the data type for a specific column, then you can do it here. We have currencies, we have numbers, we have dates, times, right? And then use first row's headers if you want to use the first row as your column header. And then replace values. So it's kind of similar with a find and replace, right? And then we have merge queries and append queries. So we're going to be discussing this in detail as well. These are really cool stuff that you can do in Power Query. Okay, let's go to the transform tab. So we have group by, we already mentioned this. Use first row's headers, yeah. Transpose, okay. So if you want to change your table layout from rows and columns, you're going to transpose or transform them into a column row order or format. Then we have reverse rows. You want to reverse the order, count rows, count the number of rows that you have, set the data type from here, right? We have rename if you want to rename the column, right? And then we have replace values, yeah. Replace errors. If you have errors all over your table, you can replace it with a more friendly value or clean value. We have fill. This is actually one of the coolest parts as well. So if you have, let's say, a value over here, right, and then blank values downwards, you can use fill down, for example, to populate the rest of the null values with whatever the non-empty value that you can see. So for example, if it's Sachiko over here, and then you have 4 empty values over here, those empty values will be populated with Sachiko. We're going to be using this a lot in our examples in the course. Okay, so we have pivot column, we have pivot columns, right? We have move, if you want to move the columns to a different location. Split column, we already discussed this. Format, right? If you want to transform it to lowercase, uppercase, capitalize each word, yeah, it's pretty cool. We have trim, clean, add prefix and suffixes, okay? You have extract, right? Okay, and then we also have parsing. This is also cool if you have the JSON format or XML format, right? If your source contains that, you can parse that as well. We have merge columns. And if it's a numerical column, then you have your basic mathematical operations that you could do. And same as well for date and time columns. For example, if you want to get the hour component or get the minute or second, right? You can do that as well. And then we have add columns, add custom column, right? So if you want a specific formula that you want to add, and then based on the different column, you can use that. Add index column, okay? So let's just try this out. So it's like adding your numbering to the rows, right? And the cool thing with Power Query is we can just undo this. And there you go. We have duplicate column. So whatever you selected, you want to duplicate that one. Conditional column, you could think of it as adding an if condition if you're familiar with the if formula. And then we have format. We already saw this one a while ago. And then we have extract, parse as well. And then the numeric operations and also the date and time operations. Last tab would be the view. So you can change the layout, right? You can just hide the formula bar. And then another one that I want to show you is the advanced editor. So this is where the inner workings or the details of what your Power Query or your specific query is doing. So you can see over here step by step. Well, we won't be going through this in detail, but it just shows you on what are the exact steps, or you could think of it like the code on what's happening inside your query. It's just something really cool to see. Okay, so that's the quick overview of the query editor or the query ribbon, right, that we use in Power Query. So if this is a bit overwhelming for you, don't worry, because in our detailed examples, we're going to be discussing more practical examples of Power Query on how we can use these individual functions over here and combine them into something really useful and cool. Okay, and I know you might be thinking as well right now that, hey, this individual functions over here, I can just do it in plain old Excel, right? Yes, you can do that in Excel, but in Power Query, we'll be showing you in detail the power when it comes to combining all of them together. Yes, each individual function might not be as useful as you think, but once you start using them together in transforming and cleaning your data, then that's the time that we will be able to appreciate Power Query for what it is. Okay, so stay tuned. We have a lot of material to cover and examples to cover that we're going to be showing you real examples on how we can transform dirty, unuseful data into something that we can really use.